There would be a time I would have said I'm complementarian as opposed to egalitarian,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Because the distinction in my mind at that point was, do you allow for women pastors? Do you understand male headship? Do you understand the hierarchy of the family?
Yep.
And that, for me, complementarian meant my wife completes me, and there's but there's still roles, and even though we're equal in Christ, there's still a hierarchy in our family. And then along comes to say, no, complementarianism is wrong. It's patriarchy. And that's what, and I'm hearing that, and I'm saying, okay. All those years I said this, right?
Sure.
What is the major? You said complementarianism has failed.
Yep.
What was the failure?
Sometimes I feel the weight of the world fall down on me so heavy, and I need a friendly voice with some good theology. Calvinistically speaking, so I mix a manly drink, Pepsi and shoe polish, and I hit the YouTube link. Don't say hit, that sounds violent. And I feel my troubles all melt away. It's your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Bosky. Beards and bow ties, laughs till sunrise. It's your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Bosky. He's not like most Calvinists, he's nice.
Hey guys, welcome back to Your Calvinist Podcast. My name is Keith Foskey, and I am your Calvinist. And today I am at the Dangerous Friends Conference, which is being put on by the ClearTruth Media, which is I'm a part of. I'm one of the contributors to ClearTruth. As many of you know, you've seen my articles there. And the man who actually introduced me to ClearTruth is sitting here with me. This is Michael Foster. Michael, thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I appreciate the friendship that we've been able to develop, and get to know one another. I'm thankful for that, and you've been a wealth of knowledge in my life. I want you to know that. Very thankful for you. I guess you probably hear that quite a bit. Men reaching out to you, telling
Every
you.
once in a while I hear something like that. So, yeah.
Well, that's cool. And you just got done with your talk here today.
I did.
Tell me real quick, and I talked to Jamie about this already. I already had a video with him. Why Dangerous Friends? Why this subject? What does it even mean?
So I had an idea for a podcast years ago called Dangerous Friends.
Okay.
Because I just have a lot of friends that kind of run the spectrum.
Yeah.
And I have more ideas than I can get to.
Yeah.
So I told Stephen Whitlow, I was like, we should do something with Dangerous Friends. And I pitched the idea to it. And then Stephen took it, developed it, and ran with it. So I think it's just the idea of sort of a Protestant ecumenicalism that's godly, rooted in historic, proven biblical doctrine.
Yeah. Almost like getting together for the gospel.
A little bit. Some of those ideas aren't bad, right?
No, I'm just teasing.
And or a coalition for the gospel, right?
Yeah.
Those ideas are good when they're not tainted by different corruptions and being cowards and stuff like that.
Yeah. And we saw a lot of that cowardice come out in the last half decade, right? Last 5 years. Yeah. In fact, I think a lot of ministries have been birthed out of what we saw in the fallout of COVID, and even previous to COVID, the rise of wokeism and things like that. It sort of separated and divided the lines.
I think so. I think Trump coming into office was a big part of it. I think things like Gamergate was a big part of that stuff. I think just the wokeism on the campus got so ridiculous, so out of control, that voices had to rise up to say something, because there's a lot of institutional men and women who were comfortable and wouldn't say something, and they just thought these things would pass. But they didn't until, and they're starting to. There's still a problem, but there's new voices that are more entrenched and fighting these things now, which is a good thing.
Well, the thing that has given you, I don't want to say the loudest voice, because you're intelligent in a lot of areas. I jokingly call you the Elon Musk of of Christianity, and I mean that in a positive way, because a lot of people don't like Elon. I
do have a lot of kids, but with one woman.
Well, definitely not that.
Yeah.
But no, you're just very intelligent. You have a way of sort of putting things that I think is very succinct and helpful, and a lot of the things you talk about are in dealing with manhood. That was your talk today.
Sure.
In fact, what was the title of your talk again?
Dangerous Men.
Dangerous Men.
It's like give the people what they want. So
when you wrote It's Good to Be Man,
yeah.
This was what, 10 years ago?
No, it hasn't been that long. So I started the Facebook page. That was the basis. That 2018. I've been reading, writing, researching sexuality since '99. I took a sociology class that really got me into it. And so I was reading Radical Feminists in a sociology class and the Church Fathers alongside them, just in my own personal reading. And that kind of led to a long-term interest on sociological and spiritual, theological issues related to sexuality.
So starting in really the end of the last century, moving in was your study period.
Yeah.
So
last millennium. Oh my goodness.
Goodness.
Yeah, it's happening.
So in that, I guess 15, 18 years of study before you wrote the book, what were some of the most amazing insights? And I know people, I can just tell people to go read the book. I'm sure they're in there, but things that you can say, I didn't expect to learn this, but I did. Can you think of anything?
Yeah. So maybe one way I deal with it. So I was much more interested in the really theoretical stuff. So I've read all sorts of studies that would definitely make people turn different shades of red. And I got interested in androgyny. Actually, the original version of It's Good to Be a Man focused heavily on androgyny. It was way more theoretical and abstract and kind of fun to write. But not probably that helpful to men at like a wide level. So I think one thing I didn't see is this sort of, I've been talking about like patriarchy and stuff forever.
Yeah.
And I've been reading guys like E. Michael Jones, which is, he's a mixed bag. I've been in that world forever. I never thought there would be this sort of sea change that we're experiencing right now. We're in a very awkward phase, but it's okay to talk about manhood again. It's okay to talk. People are willing to hear patriarchal ideas and concede that there is such thing as a good patriarchy.
Yeah.
Complementarianism has largely failed as a movement. That sort of change took me by surprise, and I didn't even realize what sort of influence It's Good to Be a Man had as a podcast or a book. Maybe 2 years ago, you write and create stuff, and you just kind of go on. And I remember I was on a plane, and someone during flight, I got my daughter in my lap, trying to read G.I. Williamson, and a guy walks up mid-flight, lights are dimmed. He says, "Are you Michael Foster?" And I was like, "I am." And he's like, "Oh, your book and all this stuff," and you find out that God's using you. So I think me and Non Tennant, who is my co-author, we wrote that book because we cared about these issues and we saw the red pill stuff really building up, and we wanted to interact with the better side, the good ideas that make it appealing but give it a biblical critique. I think we were just at the right place at the right time, kind of caught a wave. Like, it wasn't a strategy. I've never been out to grow a platform or anything like that. I enjoy writing and influencing ideas and stuff like that. So I think the big one that I didn't see coming was we kind of won. We kind of beat down complementarianism and egalitarianism, and there's a rising tide that's thinking through sexuality and masculinity better. I don't think it's taken its full mature form yet. There's a lot of immature, silly stuff out there, but I do see good things happening, and that's been refreshing and again surprising.
Sure. So if I've been around long enough to sort of have gone through the different language turns.
Yeah.
Like there would be a time maybe in the past where I would have said, if somebody said, "Where are you?" I would have said, "I'm complementarian as opposed to egalitarian."
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Because the distinction in my mind at that point was, do you allow for women pastors? Do you understand male headship? Do you understand the hierarchy of the family?
Yep.
And that, for me, complementarian meant my wife completes me, and there's but there's still roles, and even though we're equal in Christ. There's still a hierarchy in our
100%,
family.
yeah.
And then along comes to say, no, complementarianism is wrong. It's patriarchy. And that's
Yeah.
and I'm hearing that, and I'm saying, okay, all those years I said this. Right.
Sure.
What is the major? You said complementarianism has failed.
Yeah.
What was the failure?
Sure. If you go back to the Danvers statement, which is a big part of, so basically there's the Council for Biblical Equality writes the Priscilla Papers, and then you've got a response that comes out of like ETS, led by guys like Wayne Grudem, and they work together to create the Danvers statement. And one thing they don't really talk about nature as much as roles, because some of that stuff has been really offensive, and what they're trying to do is build a coalition movement to stop egalitarianism from taking over the church. So they kind of made some compromises to create a broader coalition to fight against the egalitarian threat that was rising in the 80s, right? So that's why they did that. And they didn't really get deep into nature, and they also didn't want to talk about really how sexuality affects the broader society. It was almost all home and all church, right? But society is made of homes ultimately, right? So it's to act like sexuality somehow is contained in those two domains is ridiculous. But the reason they did that was I think a lot of those better men had a goal to continue the work towards Reformation. This was the first step. So if you read early Piper on this topic really sounds what I'd call patriarchal. The reason we went with patriarchal is not because we wanted to come up with a new term. We actually threw around a bunch of new terms. I think we coined gender piety was one way to explain some of this stuff. But we went with patriarchal because that's just the idea that men are the natural rulers, right? That father rule, and that's the whole history of society. So if you ask me what my position is, I'd say biblical sexuality, right? But of course, everyone makes that claim. So with patriarchalism, all we're trying to say is that sexuality is part of the cosmos, part of the structure of society. Male headship's part of the structure of society. It's not just a church and home thing. So where complementarianism failed was not working through the difference in the female and masculine natures, and not figuring out speaking clearly how that affects society. So now that it kind of stopped its growth, and then egalitarians use complementarianism as kind of a halfway house. And they're in there. And so the kind of the second wave complementarians almost were all egalitarians. The first wave wasn't. First wave is just trying to say they're treating patriarchy as an evil patriarchy, which exists. Zayden is a father, that's evil. That's a patriarchy. Pharaoh's an evil father of a nation. That's evil patriarchy, right? Yeah. So they're kind of responding to this idea of evil patriarchy, but forgetting that God, or not acknowledging that God is a father or whatever. You can listen to early Piper actually try to make that complementarianism isn't the mean, abusive rule of fathers. Well, good, but we do need to talk about the importance of good, godly fathers and all that. So I'm not trying to create a new label. You just wear them all out, right? Yeah. Complementarianism is a very awkward one that people don't know how to spell. Also, how many of us who debates truly that men and women complement each other? Right, so it's not really even getting to the key issues. Yeah, almost everyone believes that in one way or another, except the most extreme of the extreme.
Yeah, those who would say there's an absolute equality, no difference, no distinction.
And most of those people don't even exist. They would just try to diminish it. So we're just trying to we actually tried to step away from labels and use concepts that would really confuse people. So and confuse people in a good way, like our opponents. So I focused on androgyny, and my point was...
Can you tell people what that means? I know how the word
androgyny kind of has two senses. So androgyny, it could either be saying that the sexes are interchangeable, or it can function as a blending of the sexes. Yeah. So if you look back, if you type in androgyny David Bowie, from the 1980s, he went through an androgyny sort of phase. Or Tilda Swinton, she plays an angel in in Constantine with Keanu Reeves,
Okay.
which I'm not a big fan or anything, but whether she's a man or not, it's hard to tell, right? Pat from the 80s, early 90s
It's Pat,
SNL,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Is it a man? Is it
was
a woman?
played by
We don't
Julia
know,
Sweeney,
right?
but she
Yeah.
the joke was you couldn't tell if she was
You
a man.
couldn't tell. And then she had a partner, and I can't remember that one's name, but it has another interchangeable name. So androgyny is diminishing of the value of sexual distinctions. So if you talk to feminists, women like Amy Bird, which has over time revealed herself to be a feminist, they'll talk to you about how the sexes are in common. And who's denying that in the Christian world? Who's denying that we're made in the image of God? Sure, some weird people online. You can find people that believe anything online, right? And to treat that like that's representative of a group or a large, it's just kind of silly. So ask them, though, what are some ways in which men and women are different and it's good, right? Ask them to evaluate and praise sexual distinctions, and they really get weird. And that's because they collapse the sexes into each other either explicitly or more often functionally, right?
Sure.
So we wanted to talk about androgyny. We wanted to say, you know what? You actually don't like the uniqueness of femininity. You actually don't like the uniqueness of masculinity. You're actually against sex. So sex being biological, ontological reality, and so, and make them defend the differences in the sex. I know they don't want to, because as soon as they start doing that, they're going to start moving my direction, which is the direction of Scripture and all of reality. So
That's the
what we
thing.
did.
I will say one thing I think is, when I hear you talk and I hear what you're expressing, it's the natural thing.
Everyone knows it, and Christians just pretend not to. Everyone does.
Yeah.
Like, this is, like, people say, so I can take this from the flip side. Now we got a lot of men saying we live in a woman-ran society, right? That's an argument. They call it how do you say it?
I've heard gynocracy.
There you go.
It's a gynocracy.
Say, right? I'm like,
Yes.
well, in ways, okay, really what we have is patriarchy is inevitable. You can't stop it. Men are still in control. They just use women. And what I was going to say is these guys will say, well, women overpower men by seducing them with their sexuality. They do, but there's almost always a pimp involved. Right, either a literal pimp or the pimp that owns OnlyFans. Well, these and still 95% of presidents of companies, CEOs of companies, are men. The richest women in the world, with the exception of the Harry Potter woman, J.K. Rowling, almost all of them get all their money through marriage or whatever. Women that have power, usually given power in one way or another by men to keep other men down, is usually what you see. Like, we still live in a patriarchal society of one form or another. You might say legally we don't live in a patriarchal society in a way that men's rights are protected, and I wouldn't disagree there. But I would say, yeah, it's because you have to get this distinction between biblical or godly and ungodly patriarchy. They have both forms. And so I think even now I see guys denying that men are more powerful. If the reason women have power in America is a certain group of men abdicated when evil men stepped up. If women, it's the same guys that believe that women are truly inferior in all ways. So I don't have a problem with saying that there's sexual rank. There is, where men are the leaders in society in the same sense that, like, a captain of a ship or whatever. It's not that there's some a way that they represent the image of God more than a woman or whatever. Okay, so what you'll find is that they are denying that the women have that power because men gave it to them. And so they ultimately are, like, undermining their own commitment to patriarchy from the right. And part of that's because these guys feel disempowered, they're frustrated. A lot of these guys have come to resent women because pornography, right? But even pornography is almost owned by a bunch of dudes that are using these guys. So I'm not trying to absolve the women of their sin or being complicit in that. They have agency. I'm just saying that men have ruled, they always will rule, And it's a question of like how concentrated the power is in a few men and what form that power takes, whether it's righteous or unrighteous.
Awesome. One last thing,
Yep.
and I know there's other guys who want to interview. So you've said a few times in the interview that there are evil patriarchy, right?
Yeah,
Because
100%.
obviously
Yeah.
you're a proponent of godly masculinity.
Sure.
In fact,
yeah. I'm a Christian.
Do you remember Tim Allen?
Yeah.
I loved it. Back in the 80s, 90s when he was doing stand-up.
Yeah.
He said, "I'm not a feminist. I'm a masculinist."
Yeah,
So like that'd be fun. Like instead of say,
That's Aaron Ren's name of it. That's the name of Aaron Ren's old newsletter.
"Oh, really? The
Yeah,
masculinist?" Yeah. So, what is evil patriarchy? I mean, I think any of us could think of maybe one or two people in our mind, the Andrew Tate's kind of guys. But is there evil patriarchy even in our faith? And I'm not asking you to name names or point at people, but to say, what does it look like?
So first, just to kind of lay some groundwork, is that so there's a difference between homosexuality and heterosexuality. So homosexuality is always unnatural. Heterosexuality is natural. That doesn't mean every manifestation of heterosexuality is virtuous. So it's natural for a man and a woman to want to be intimate together.
Yeah.
But that's reserved for marriage, right?
Yeah.
That's reserved for purposes, right? To develop intimacy and have children. So just because something's natural doesn't always mean that every manifestation is good. So it is with patriarchy. Patriarchy is very natural. It's not against nature. But if you take power and you divorce it from the purpose of God, so all authority, you can think of authority as like energy. So authority is neither created nor destroyed like energy. It just moves from one thing to another. So God delegates authority to different institutions, the home, the church, the state, and those that authority has a purpose. When one fails to exercise that authority according to God's purpose, the other one kind of gobbles it up. So when you have the home, the father's not leading, then children grow up to be dysfunctional, ungodly, and then someone has to exercise authority over that trouble. So it either falls to the church, that's where you get guys like D.L. Moody creating Sunday schools and all that stuff to try to meet a need, or you get a overly paternalistic government that steps in, right?
Yeah.
So evil patriarchy, it comes in the form of either abdication of not doing what you're supposed to do, like a sin of omission, or taking power that is given to another institution, or abusing your power for selfish reasons and not for the purpose of God, more of a sin of commission, right? Something you do it on purpose.
Yeah.
And so evil patriarchy is any abuse of God's authority that he's invested in you against any abuse of that's not for his glory or the good of others. That would be evil. So any like pastors, like I have authority, I'm not ashamed of it.
Sure.
But it's delegated authority. It has limits.
Yeah.
I can tell you, you may not marry a non-Christian. I can't exactly tell you, you may not marry this person, right?
Exactly.
I do have real authority. So that's where, when you're dealing with something like, so Calvinism's good, hyper-Calvinism's not. We put hyper in just to say that this has taken some aspect of this theology and divorced it from the whole and have absolutized that part of that theology. So hyper-patriarchy is where it kind of overemphasizes the man's natural authority and breaks it away from its purpose. And so anyway that plays out, a father that's not checked by church elders, right?
Yeah.
A father that isn't checked by legitimate governmental authority. You know, governmental authority that's not checked by the church saying you may not have your brother's wife, right? A man or a church that's not checked by the men in the church saying that you have moved away from Scripture. So evil patriarchy is patriarchy that is removed from the whole of God's design for how authority and spheres work together.
Awesome. Well, brother, that was all very helpful. And I know you got other things to do, so I'm gonna say I appreciate you. Appreciate again just your willingness to invite me in and let me be a part of what you're doing. And I look forward to. Last thing, tell us about the Blue Collar Confessional, because we got that coming up.
I'm gonna start advertising that, don't I? Blue Collar Confessionalism is a conference that we have set up for this fall. It's during Labor Day weekend, so it's like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then you're going to be there and a bunch of other people, and we're going to tell people how to take old school confessional theology and to apply it to every day, the thing right in front of you.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you again for being on the show.
Yep.
Thank you for giving me your time and for talking to us about patriarchy. Masculinity.
All of it. All of the
All of it. All
yeah.
of it. And guys, thank you for watching the show today. Again, I want to remind you the best way you can support the show is by hitting the subscribe button. And if you like this episode specifically, hit the thumbs up button. And if you didn't, hit the thumbs down button twice. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next show. God bless.
Sometimes I feel the weight of the world fall down on me, and I need a friendly voice with some good theology. So I mix a manly drink, then I hit the YouTube link, and I feel my troubles all melt away. Oh, it's Your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Foskey. Beards and bow ties, laughs till sunrise. It's Your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Foskey. He's not like most Calvinists, he's nice.
Your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Foskey, striving for superior theology and denominational unity, one joke at a time.